Hi, I'm Rachel Gaines. I'm 28 years old, and until recently I thought family meant unconditional love. That all changed 6 months ago when my mother tried to destroy me because I refused to sign over something precious. For as long as I can remember, my family was complex. My parents, Diane and Charles, always seemed to have their hands full with my younger brother, Tyler. He was the golden child, the star, the one who could do no wrong. Me? I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who faded into the background. And honestly, for a long time, I was okay with that. It meant I spent most of my time with my grandpa Henry. He was my anchor, my confidant, the one who saw me for who I truly was. He taught me about integrity, hard work, and standing up for what's right. He always instilled in me a sense of self-worth that, truthfully, I never really got from my mom or dad. Then, 6 months ago, Grandpa Henry passed away. It was devastating, but in his will, he left me everything. The house, the land, the savings. Not my brother. Me. It wasn't about the money for me, it was about his trust, his belief in me. It was his final, profound gesture of love. But when my parents found out, their reaction was something I had never anticipated, a raw, bitter fury I never knew they possessed. They didn't just object, they acted as if I had stolen something that was rightfully theirs, or, more accurately, Tyler's. They expected me to just hand it over to my golden boy little brother. No questions asked, no hesitation. They painted it as an obvious, simple solution. Tyler needs it more, my mom said, as if that explained everything. He'll be able to do so much with it. And when I refused? When I said no, a word I realized they rarely heard from me, especially when it came to anything involving Tyler's perceived needs. My mother made sure I paid the price. She didn't just disapprove. She systematically started to dismantle my life. What would you do if the people who raised you, the ones who were supposed to protect and nurture you, tried to ruin you? How far would you go to protect what's yours, especially when it's not just about material things, but about a legacy, a trust, a bond that transcends life and death? Tell me in the comments. And if you're ready to hear how I fought back against one of the most painful betrayals imaginable, one that cut deeper than any physical wound, then like and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that cut deep. You won't want to miss what happened next. From the moment I was a small child, my bond with my grandpa Henry was different, deeper than any other family connection. My parents were always busy. My mother, Diane, was consumed by appearances and social climbing, always orchestrating events and dominating conversations. My father, Charles, was usually somewhere in our shadow, avoiding any kind of friction, his presence more of an echo than a statement. And then there was Tyler, my little brother, who made to effortlessly absorb all their attention. He was charming, loud, and always the center of whatever universe my parents inhabited. He was showered with praise, opportunities, and an endless stream of material things. While Tyler was off at exclusive summer camps or getting the latest gaming console, I was often with Grandpa Henry. He lived just a few towns over, in the quiet, sprawling house that became my sanctuary. Grandpa, a war veteran, had a quiet strength about him, a wisdom etched into the lines around his eyes. He taught me how to garden, how to fix things around the house, and most importantly, how to think for myself. He didn't just talk to me. He listened, truly listened, to my dreams, my fears, my childish musings. He saw the quiet, observant girl I was, not the outgoing, boisterous one my parents seemed to wish I'd be. He instilled in me values that seemed absent from our main family home: integrity, humility, and the belief that actions speak louder than words. While Mom and Dad were busy polishing Tyler's image, Grandpa was polishing my character. He taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 12, how to invest small amounts of money when I was 15, and how to critically analyze situations when I was 18. He helped me apply for colleges, not just the ones with the flashiest names, but the ones that truly suited my academic interests. He even helped pay for part of my tuition, a fact my parents barely acknowledged, too caught up in Tyler's latest sporting achievement or social triumph. Tyler, on the other hand, rarely saw Grandpa. He found his stories boring, his house too old-fashioned, and his rules too restrictive. While I was learning about compound interest or pruning rose bushes with Grandpa, Tyler was out partying, coasting through school, relying on my parents to smooth over every stumble. He developed an undeniable sense of entitlement, believing that everything would always just fall into his lap. My parents encouraged this, making excuses for his poor grades, bailing him out of minor scrapes, and generally ensuring he faced no real consequences for his actions. I remember one afternoon, just a few months before he passed, Grandpa and I were sitting on his porch swing. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. "Rachel," he said, his voice raspy, "there's a storm brewing. Always is, when things aren't built on solid ground." He paused, looking out at the horizon. "You're strong, my girl. Stronger than any of them know. You've got a good head on your shoulders and a heart of gold. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not worthy of what you earn or what you're given. Some people, they only see what they want to see, and they'll try to take what isn't theirs." His words, cryptic at the time, felt heavy in the air. Now, I understand they were a direct foreshadowing of the battle to come. He knew. He always knew the storm that would follow his passing. He chose me not out of favoritis, but out of a deep understanding of who I was and who my family truly was. He chose me because he knew I would honor his legacy and that I would be the one strong enough to face the inevitable fallout. Each day of the will reading felt heavy, thick with unspoken expectations. My parents, accompanied by Tyler, arrived at the attorney's office with an air of practiced solemnity, yet beneath it, I sensed a simmering anticipation. I knew what they expected. For as long as I could remember, Grandpa Henry's estate, especially the old house, had been a topic of hushed speculation within the family. My mother often spoke of its potential and how Tyler would just love to fix it up someday. They assumed, naturally, that as the male heir, the favored child, the one who carried the family name on the side, Tyler would be the primary beneficiary. I, the quiet and unassuming elder sister, was probably expected to receive some token, a piece of jewelry perhaps, a small sum for sentimentality. We sat around a large, polished conference table. Mr. Henderson, Grandpa's lifelong lawyer and friend, cleared his throat, his gaze kind but firm. He opened a thick, legal-sized envelope, the crinkle of paper loud in the hushed room. He began with the usual legal formalities, the preamble of dates and definitions, and then he began to read. "To my beloved daughter, Diane Gaines, I leave $1 as a token of my profound disappointment in the choices she has made." A choked gasp escaped my mother's lips. Her face, usually so composed, contorted with a mixture of shock and disbelief. My father shifted uneasily in his seat, his eyes darting towards Diane, then quickly away. Tyler, who had been fiddling with his phone, finally looked up, a frown creasing his brow. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice unwavering, reading through various small bequests to charities and distant relatives. My parents grew increasingly agitated. This wasn't going as planned. There was no mention of the house, no mention of the bulk of the estate. Then he paused, took a sip of water, and looked directly at me. "And to my granddaughter, Rachel Gaines," he read, his voice gaining a clear resonance, "who has been a true beacon of light in my life, an embodiment of the values I hold dear, and my dearest friend. I leave everything else. My primary residence located at 123 Oakwood Lane, including all adjoining lands and properties, my entire financial portfolio is held in my various accounts, and all remaining personal possessions." A stunned silence descended upon the room. It wasn't a polite silence. It was the kind that screams with unspoken outrage. My mother's eyes, fixed on me, narrowed into slits. The color drained from her face, leaving her complexion ghostly. Tyler's jaw dropped, then clenched. He looked as if he'd been personally insulted, his face turning a furious shade of red. "What?" he finally managed to sputter, pushing his chair back with a violent scrape against the flue. That's impossible. This is a joke, right?" Mr. Henderson calmly looked at him. "The will is perfectly sound, Mr. Gaines. Signed, witnessed, and notarized according to all legal requirements." My mother, Diane, didn't say a word. She simply rose from her chair, her movements stiff and deliberate, her eyes still locked on me with an intensity that promised retribution. Without a single glance at her husband or son, she turned and walked out of the office, the door clicking softly behind her, a sound that felt deafening in the charged air. Her silent departure was more chilling than any yell could have been. Tyler, meanwhile, exploded. He slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. Grandpa wouldn't. He loved me. This has to be wrong. She manipulated him." That's it. She manipulated him. He was frantic, pacing like a caged animal. My father sat there, a portrait of weak indecision. He wouldn't look at me, couldn't. He just kept his gaze fixed on the table, a pathetic, almost imperceptible shake in his shoulders. The storm Grandpa had warned me about was no longer brewing. It had just broken. And I was standing right in the middle of ITHE day after the will reading, the facade of family shattered completely. The initial silence from my mother was far more unsettling than an outright confrontation would have been. It was the calm before the storm, and I knew it. The very next morning, the calls and texts began, at first subtly, then with increasing frequency and intensity. My father, Charles, was the first to reach out. His tone was strained, riddled with a pathetic mixture of attempted appeasement and thinly veiled instruction. "Rachel," he'd begin, his voice lacking its usual, quiet neutrality, "your mother is very upset. We just think. It's not what your grandfather would have truly wanted, you know? He loved Tyler so much. It just feels unfair." The guilt tripping was immediate, trying to twist Grandpa's clear wishes into some kind of unintentional slight. I reminded him that Grandpa had made his intentions very clear, very deliberately. He mumbled something about misunderstandings and hung up, clearly uncomfortable with my refusal to bend. Then came Tyler. His messages were a mixture of outrage and pathetic pleas. "Seriously, Rach? You're actually going to hoard all of Grandpa's stuff? After everything Mom and Dad did for you? This is messed up. I really need that house, you know. My band is taking off, and it would be the perfect place for us to practice, to host parties. You don't even need it. You have your own apartment, your own life." He tried bribery too, offering me a generous stipend if I would just sign the house over to him. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He saw everything Grandpa left me as a means to an end for his own frivolous desires. I calmly explained that Grandpa's legacy was not for sale or for his band practice. His subsequent text devolved into insults, calling me greedy and selfish. But the real mastermind, of course, was my mother, Diane. Her calls were insidious, crafted with chilling precision. She never raised her voice beyond a carefully controlled, cutting tone. "Rachel," she'd purr, "we need to talk about this. Unfortunate situation. You know, dear, everyone in the family, all our friends, they're asking about it. They're so sad that Grandpa's generosity might be misunderstood. It puts us all in such an awkward position." This was classic gaslighting, trying to shift the blame onto me for having the audacity to accept what was legally and ethically mine. When guilt didn't work, she moved to threats, thinly veiled at first. It would be a shame if this caused irreparable damage to our family. The climax of this initial phase was the family dinner my mother arranged. It wasn't a dinner. It was an ambush. I walked into their house, and the air was thick with tension. My parents sat opposite me, Tyler conspicuously placed to my side, ready to chime in. The meal itself was barely touched. My mother launched into a tirade about family loyalty, about the sacrifices they'd made for me, about how I was breaking the family apart. Tyler jumped in with his manufactured grievances, portraying himself as the victim of my supposed greed. My father, true to form, sat silently, occasionally nodding his head in agreement with Diane's increasingly dramatic pronouncements. It was a full-blown intervention, designed to break my spirit and coerce me into compliance. They presented me with pre-typed documents, ready for my signature, documents that would transfer the house and a significant portion of the assets to Tyler. My mother even presented me with a printed list of bullet points detailing why this was the right thing to do, a twisted manifesto of their distorted reality. But in that moment, seeing their calculated efforts, something shifted inside me. The years of feeling overlooked, the quiet strength Grandpa had instilled in me, it all solidified. I looked at each of them coolly, steadily. "No," I said, my voice clear and unwavering, cutting through their orchestrated drama. "I will not sign anything. This is what Grandpa wanted, and I will honor his wishes." My mother's perfectly composed face finally cracked. Her eyes, usually so calculating, gleamed with something darker, something cold and sharp. It wasn't anger. It was a profound, chilling resolve. It was then, in that defeated silence, that I saw it, the seed of revenge, planted firmly in her gaze. She wasn't going to just try to convince me anymore. She was going to make me pay for my defiance. She ambushed dinner, cemented my resolve. But it also signaled a chilling escalation from my parents. The threats shed their thin veils. A week after I refused to sign away my inheritance, a formal-looking envelope arrived in my mail. It bore the letterhead of a law firm I didn't recognize, distinctly not Mr. Henderson's. My heart sank as I opened it. The letter was coldly professional, yet its message sizzled with underlying malice. It stated in precise legal terms that my parents were initiating proceedings to contest Grandpa Henry's will. The justification? They claimed I had influenced and manipulated my grandfather during his final months. They painted a picture of me as a calculating opportunist, taking advantage of an ailing old man. It insinuated that I had isolated him from the family, that I had coerced him into leaving me everything. The irony was almost laughable, considering I was the one who actually spent time with him, caring for him, while they were largely absent. This wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a psychological attack, a public declaration of war. They were willing to drag my grandfather's good name through the mud, to malign my character, all to get their hands on what they believed was rightfully theirs for Tyler. The letter ended with an ultimatum disguised as a reasonable offer. Sign over the estate now, and they would drop the contestation and avoid a messy, highly public legal battle that would surely damage my reputation. If I refused, they promised they would pursue every legal avenue available, no matter the cost, no matter the scandal. My first instinct was panic. I was a young accountant, just starting to build my career. The idea of my name being dragged through a messy legal battle, accused of fraud and manipulation, was terrifying. But then, Grandpa Henry's words echoed in my mind. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not worthy. Some people, they only see what they want to see, and they'll try to take what isn't theirs. He had seen this coming. He had tried to prepare me. I called Mr. Henderson immediately. He calmly reassured me that their claims were baseless. Grandpa Henry had been of sound mind, and his will was meticulously drafted and witnessed. But he also warned me that the legal process, even for a clear-cut case, could be long, stressful, and expensive. He said they were likely banking on wearing me down, on pressuring me into giving in to avoid the headache. He offered his full support, of course, reminding me again of his deep respect for my grandfather. Despite his reassurances, a chill settled over me. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. It was a full-blown assault. And then the sabotage began. It wasn't immediate, not a sudden collapse, but a gradual, insidious erosion of my life. First, things started going wrong at my job. Small errors appeared in my spreadsheets, things I knew I hadn't made. Files seemed to go missing from my computer, only to reappear later. My boss, usually so supportive, started looking at me with a questioning glance. I brushed it off at first, attributing it to stress, but the incidents became too frequent, too specific. Then, my apartment building. My landlord, who had always been perfectly pleasant, suddenly became overly critical. Fictitious complaints about noise, about cleanliness, about things I knew weren't true, started appearing under my door. I was issued warnings, then fines. It felt coordinated, almost as if someone was building a case against me. My carefully constructed, independent world began to feel like it was cracking under an unseen pressure. The ultimatum wasn't just a letter. It was a promise. And it was clear my parents, or more specifically my mother, was already making good on it. She was trying to isolate me, to strip away my stability, leaving me vulnerable enough to bend to her will. She wanted me to have nothing left to stand on, nothing to fight with. What I didn't realize then was just how far she was willing to go. The warning shot of the liar's letter had quickly escalated into a full-blown siege. My world, once stable and predictable, began to unravel with chilling efficiency. It started with my living situation. Despite being a model tenant for years, my landlord suddenly became aggressively difficult. Minor, fabricated complaints about noise after quiet hours, phantom smells, and even an absurd claim about my cat, who was indoors only and meticulously clean, began to pile up. I found myself receiving official notices, then warnings, and finally, a 30-day eviction notice based on these dubious, unsubstantiated claims. It was designed to be impossible to fight, a paper trail of invented grievances leading to a legal but morally reprehensible removal. It became clear someone had either bribed him or fed him misinformation, making my life as complicated as possible. Within weeks, I was suddenly without a home. Then came the attack on my career. As an accountant, my reputation for integrity was paramount. One Tuesday morning, my boss, Mr. Thompson, called me into his office, his face grim. On his desk lay an anonymous letter, neatly typed, filled with accusations of financial misconduct. It claimed I had been skimming from client accounts, manipulating ledgers, and taking bribes. The allegations were utterly false, preposterous even. I was furious, indignant. I offered to open my books, subject myself to any audit, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Mr. Thompson, usually a fair man, appeared uncomfortable, visibly torn. The firm couldn't afford a scandal, real or imagined. Despite my spotless record, the letter alone created an untenable situation. They put me on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. It was a soft termination, a polite way of saying my employment was over without admitting they were letting me go based on a malicious, anonymous tip. My income, my stability, gone. My personal life wasn't spared either. My boyfriend, Mark, and I had been together for almost 2 years, building a relationship based on trust and mutual respect. One evening, he arrived at my apartment, his face pale, his phone clutched in his hand. He showed me a series of doctored photos, clearly fake, but just convincing enough to plant a seed of doubt. They depicted me in compromising positions with various men I didn't know and places I'd never been. The accompanying texts alluded to my supposed secret life, a web of infidelity. Mark was devastated, hurt, and confused. I tried to explain, to reassure him, to show him the obvious manipulations. But the trust had been eroded. He couldn't look at me the same way. We broke up, his pain evident, his belief in me irrevocably damaged. My emotional support system shattered. One by one, every pillar of my life was pulled out from under me. My secure apartment, my promising career, my loving relationship, all systematically dismantled. I felt adrift, isolated, stripped bare. I was staying on a friend's couch, scrambling for temp work, watching my carefully built adult life crumble. It was during one particularly bleak evening, waiting outside my parents' house to retrieve some old childhood photos I'd left there, that I found it. My mother, rushing out to pick up something she'd forgotten, dropped her handbag. As I bent to help her gather the spilled contents, a burner phone, cheap and nondescript, slid out from beneath her wallet. My mother snatched it back quickly, too quickly, her eyes wide with a fleeting panic that she tried to cover with a dismissive wave. But I had seen it, and a strange intuition, a cold clench in my stomach, told me it was important. Later that night, as I lay awake on my friend's uncomfortable couch, the image of that burner phone kept replaying in my mind. It was a tool of secrecy, of deception. The pieces clicked into place, horrible puzzle pieces forming a picture of calculated cruelty. The anonymous letter to my boss, the sudden, fabricated complaints from my landlord, the fake photos sent to Mark, it all screamed of a single, malevolent hand pulling the strings. My mother's hand. She had made good on her unspoken promise. She had indeed set out to make sure I had nothing left. And at that exact moment, hitting rock bottom, I felt a new resolve harden within me. It was no longer about defending myself. It was about fighting back. Being stripped of everything had a strange, almost liberating effect. There was no more illusion of family loyalty, no more pretense of unconditional love. My parents had shown their true colors, and with nothing left to lose, a chilling clarity settled over me. Hitting rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the ultimate catalyst. My first move was to embrace what was mine, physically and emotionally. The house Grandpa Henry had left me was vacant, a silent testament to his wisdom and foresight. So I packed what few belongings I had left, said goodbye to my sympathetic friend's couch, and moved into the sprawling, old-fashioned home that was now legally mine. Stepping across the threshold, a sense of peace and a fierce determination washed over me. This wasn't just a house. It was my sanctuary, my headquarters for the war that was coming. My time as an accountant, though abruptly cut short, had taught me the value of meticulous record-keeping, of understanding the intricate dance of money and influence. Grandpa, too, had imparted a sharp eye for detail and an appreciation for strategy. Now, I needed to put those skills to the ultimate test. My tech-savvy cousin, Lacey, was the first person I reached out to. Lacey was a force of nature, a brilliant, quirky coder who worked remotely and understood the digital landscape like no one else. I drove to her apartment, a cramped space filled with glowing computer screens, and laid bare everything that had happened. The eviction, the false accusations at work, the fake photos sent to Mark, and the burner phone my mother had accidentally dropped. Lacey listened intently, her eyes narrowing as I spoke, a silent rage building within her for the injustice. She'd always had a soft spot for Grandpa Henry and despised my mother's manipulative tendencies. "This isn't just revenge, Rach," Lacey said, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. "This is about exposing toxic behavior and protecting yourself. We're going to find out everything." Her expertise was invaluable. She began digging into digital footprints, searching for any connection between my sudden misfortunes and known contacts of my parents. She understood the subtle art of tracing anonymous communications, of looking for patterns. My next call was to Mr. Henderson, Grandpa's lawyer. He was more than just a lawyer. He was an old family friend, a man who had known me since I was a child and had deeply respected Grandpa. I explained the escalating sabotage, the loss of my job, my apartment, my relationship. He listened with growing concern, confirming what I already suspected. This was an orchestrated campaign of malicious intent. "Rachel," he said, his voice grave, "your mother is playing a very dangerous game. What she's doing is not only morally reprehensible, but some of it is likely criminal." He assured me that his office would handle all communication regarding the will contestation. More importantly, he offered his legal expertise, not just in defending Grandpa's will, but in helping me build a case against my parents for defamation and harassment. He had a deep understanding of my family's dynamics and was genuinely appalled by Diane's actions. With Lacey working her digital magic and Mr. Henderson providing the legal framework, I began my own investigation. I started by piecing together the timeline of events, cross-referencing every strange occurrence with my family's increasingly hostile behavior. I remembered conversations, casual remarks, things that had seemed innocuous at the time but now took on a sinister new meaning. I focused on my mother's financial activities, something Grandpa Henry had always subtly warned me about. He'd mentioned once that Diane was always a little too good with other people's money. This wasn't just about getting my life back. It was about exposing the truth, about holding those who sought to destroy me accountable. The calm before the counters. Trike was a period of intense, focused planning. I was no longer the quiet, agreeable Rachel. The pain had forged a new identity, one that was sharp, strategic, and utterly fearless. My parents had tried to leave me with nothing, but in doing so, they had given me the one thing I truly needed, an unshakable determination to fight back. And this time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was coming for them. With Lacey's tech prowess and Mr. Henderson's legal guidance, I began to dismantle the meticulously crafted illusions my parents had built around themselves. They prided themselves on their impeccable reputations, their community standing, and their financial savvy. I knew just where to strike. My mother, Diane, was particularly proud of her influential role in the local church committee. She presented herself as a pillar of the community, organizing charity drives and managing funds for various church projects. This was precisely where Lacey's talents shone. I tasked her with looking into the church's financial records, cross-referencing public donation figures with internal reports. It wasn't long before Lacey found discrepancies. Small amounts at first, then larger ones siphoned off over years. It was clear and undeniable proof of embezzlement. Diane had been siphoning off funds for years, slowly, incrementally, making sure it flew under the radar. Lacey compiled it all into a meticulous, irrefutable report. "Leak it," I told her. Anonymously, of course. To the local newspaper, to key figures within the church congregation, and to the diocesan authorities. The fallout was immediate and devastating. The scandal rocked the community my mother had so carefully cultivated. Her carefully constructed facade of piety and civic duty shattered, leaving behind only the image of a greedy, corrupt opportunist. The very people she sought to impress and dominate now looked upon her with disgust and betrayal. Her social standing, her most cherished asset, crumbled overnight. My father, Charles, was a trickier target. His role was more passive, an enabler, a shadow. But even shadows cast a mark. Grandpa Henry, in one of his rare, dismissive comments about my father, had once mentioned Charles' unfortunate habit of chasing high-stakes thrills. It was a subtle clue, but enough for Lacey to start digging into local real estate records and bank statements. What she found was shocking, even to me. Charles had taken out not one, but two secret second mortgages on their family home, funneling the money into a series of increasingly desperate and spectacularly unsuccessful online gambling ventures. He'd hidden it all from my mother, terrified of her reaction. The illusion of my father as a stable, if meek, provider dissolved into that of a desperate, addicted man risking their financial stability for fleeting adrenaline. I didn't leak this information publicly, not directly. Instead, I carefully packaged the evidence, the mortgage documents, the gambling transaction histories, and had Mr. Henderson's office send it directly to my mother's lawyer, timed perfectly to coincide with the revelation of her church embezzlement. The goal wasn't public humiliation for Charles, but for my mother to realize the full extent of the house of cards she was living in. The silence on their end after that package was delivered was deafening. And then there was the defamation lawsuit. Mr. Henderson expertly drafted a suit against my parents for the malicious attacks on my character, the anonymous tip to my employer, and the fabricated complaints to my landlord. We had compelling evidence due to Lacey's digging and the burner phone my mother had unwittingly revealed. This wasn't just about damage control. It was about holding them legally accountable for the havoc they'd wreaked on my life. Finally, and perhaps most deliciously, was the hidden clause in Grandpa Henry's will. Mr. Henderson, with a knowing wink, reminded me of it. Grandpa, in his profound wisdom, had anticipated such a scenario. Tucked away in the meticulously drafted legal document was a specific provision. If any named beneficiary or their direct descendant attempted to contest the will, they would automatically forfeit any and all inheritance permanently. This included the substantial trust fund that Diane had secretly been counting on inheriting, a fund that was explicitly structured to transfer to her upon my grandfather's death, provided she did not challenge the will. Her greed, her blatant disregard for Grandpa's wishes, had led her to forfeit the very portion of his estate she thought was hers by right. She had assumed, arrogantly, that I would fold. She had assumed Grandpa hadn't seen through her games. But he had, and he'd laid a trap for her, a trap she had walked straight into. The beauty of this counterstrike was its multi-pronged nature. It hit them where it hurt, their reputation, their financial stability, and their sense of control. They had tried to destroy me, but in doing so, they had unwittingly handed me the tools to destroy their perfect illusions and why Parents' World was imploding. But Tyler, the golden boy, was largely oblivious, insulated by his own self-importance and my mother's endless indulgence. He continued to live a life far beyond his means, driving a new luxury car, living in a lavish apartment, all funded by my parents' increasingly desperate attempts to keep up his illusion of success. I knew from my accountant's eye that his supposed ban taking off wasn't actually covering these expenses. And with Diane's embezzlement revealed and Charles' gambling debts exposed, their well of unspoken funds was rapidly drying up. It was time to give Tyler a choice, a chance to escape the sinking ship his parents were navigating. I had Lacey redouble her efforts, focusing on Tyler's recent acquisitions. It turned out my suspicions were well-founded. Lacey discovered that the luxury car he was driving, the rent for his expensive downtown apartment, even the new recording equipment for his band had all been paid for from bank accounts my mother had opened in Grandpa Henry's name prior to his death. These were funds siphoned off using various clever, manipulative tactics that left a paper trail only a skilled forensic accountant or a very angry, tech-savvy niece could uncover. It was essentially theft, not from me, but from Grandpa's estate before it formally became mine. It wouldn't hold up in court if Grandpa was alive, but with him gone and their attempts to contest the will, it was a very messy situation that would unravel a lot of uncomfortable truths. I arranged a meeting with Tyler. I chose a neutral, public place, a quiet coffee shop far from our usual haunts. He walked in, radiating his usual arrogant charm, probably expecting me to grovel or to finally concede. He looked bored, annoyed I was wasting his time. "What's so important, Rachel?" he asked, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. "Are you finally ready to be reasonable about Grandpa's house?" I pushed a neat folder across the table towards him. Inside were printouts of bank statements, car titles, and lease agreements. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized his name, his car, his apartment. He started to flip through them, his expression shifting from boredom to confusion, then to a dawning, panicked realization. These accounts, I said, my voice calm, were opened by Mom using Grandpa's social security number and funds before he passed away. Everything you've been enjoying, the car, the rent, the equipment, it's all tied to these. It's a messy legal gray area, Tyler. You've technically been receiving stolen funds. And with Mom and Dad's financial issues now very public, people are going to start asking questions. The IRS isn't going to be too happy when they look into this. His face drained of color. He finally understood. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about potential legal ramifications for him. His perfect, pampered life was based on a mountain of shaky, illegal transactions. So, what do you want? He choked out, his voice a whisper. I'm giving you a choice, Tyler, I replied, looking him straight in the eye. You can continue to stick with Mom and Dad, deny everything, and sync with them. When the full extent of their financial dealings comes out, and believe me, it will, these accounts linked to you are going to be scrutinized. You'll be implicated, dragged into a very public, very humiliating mess. Auditors, investigators, maybe even charges. Or, I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Or you can quietly and publicly disassociate yourself from them. Admit you were just a foolish kid manipulated by your parents. Cut ties. Return the car, break the lease, get your own life. Get out. Walk away scot-free. This information stays buried, a private warning between you and me. He was visibly torn. The golden boy, used to having everything, handed to him, suddenly faced with the prospect of actual consequences. He stammered, he pleaded, he tried to argue that he didn't know, that Mom handled everything. But I interrupted him. You're 26, Tyler. Ignorance isn't an excuse when it comes to this kind of money. Just make your choice. He took a deep breath, looked at the documents again, then at me. For a moment, I thought he might finally choose his own survival. But then the entitlement, the ingrained habit of doubling down, took over. You're bluffing, he sneered, pushing the folder away. My parents will always protect me. You wouldn't dare. You're just trying to scare me. He foolishly chose loyalty to his crumbling illusion. I simply nodded. Your choice, I said, rising from the table. Days later, the IRS audits began. Not just for my parents, but for him too. His fall from grace was imminent, and he had nobody to blame but himself. Each day in court was surreal. It felt like the culmination of everything Grandpa's enduring trust, my parents' escalating malice, and my own quiet resolve hardening into something unbreakable. The courtroom itself was stark, imposing, a true theater of justice. My parents, Diane and Charles, sat across the aisle from me, flanked by their bewildered-looking lawyer. Diane's usual composed demeanor was fractured, her gaze darting nervously. Charles looked pale and shrunken. Tyler was conspicuously absent. Mr. Henderson, my lawyer and Grandpa's old friend, was magnificent. He began by methodically presenting the initial contestation of Grandpa Henry's will. Their lawyer presented their flimsy arguments, vaguely citing undue influence and manipulation on my part. But Mr. Henderson countered powerfully, introducing medical reports confirming Grandpa's sound mind until his final days, and detailed accounts of my long-standing, loving relationship with him, contrasted sharply with my family's distant, transactional interactions. He reminded the court that Grandpa Henry was a war veteran, a man of sharp intellect and unwavering convictions, not easily swayed or influenced. The judge, clearly, was not buying their narrative. Then Mr. Henderson shifted. He began to introduce the evidence pertaining to my defamation lawsuit against my parents. He calmly, but devastatingly, laid out the paper trail that Lacey and I had meticulously collected. He presented the anonymous letter sent to my former boss, detailing the fabricated accusations of financial misconduct. He showed the email correspondence with my landlord, exposing the baseless nature of the eviction complaints, subtly hinting at outside interference. He didn't even need to touch on Mark or the fake photos. The pattern of malicious intent was already overwhelmingly clear. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. My parents' lawyer objected, stammered, tried to dismiss the new evidence as irrelevant. But the judge, a stern, sharp-eyed woman, allowed it, seeing the clear connection between our malicious actions and the will contestation attempt. Then came the clincher. Mr. Henderson produced the original, authenticated copy of Grandpa Henry's will, and in a clear, resonant voice, read aloud the specific clause that stipulated any attempt to contest the will by a beneficiary or their direct descendants would result in their forfeiture of all inheritance within the estate permanently. A gasp rippled through the gallery. It wasn't just Grandpa's house and liquid assets they were losing by contesting. It was the substantial trust fund that Diane had been banking on for years, a fund specifically set aside for her, contingent on her respecting Grandpa's final wishes. Her face went slack as the realization hit her. The trust fund she'd been secretly counting on to bail out their gambling debts and make up for her own embezzled funds was now irrevocably gone, lost due to her own greedy, destructive actions. The judge's verdict was swift and decisive. She upheld Grandpa Henry's will in its entirety, reaffirming my sole inheritance of his estate. She then addressed the defamation lawsuit, finding my parents liable for the damages I had incurred due to their malicious actions, citing their clear pattern of harassment and slander. She imposed significant penalties on them, including a substantial award of damages to me for lost wages, emotional distress, and legal fees. My father finally looked at me, a desperate, confused plea in his eyes, but I offered nothing back. He had stood by and watched as his wife systematically destroyed my life. He was as culpable as she was. But the most satisfying moment was not the judge's pronouncements or the financial restitution. It was seeing the look on my mother's face. Diane Gaines, the woman who had always been so meticulously composed, so calculatingly manipulative, finally lost her mask. Her eyes, usually so sharp and cold, were wide with a dawning horror. The confidence, the belief in her own untouchability, completely vanished. It was a look of pure, unadulterated shock and profound defeat. In that single, fleeting instant, I saw it. The realization that she had not only underestimated me, her quiet, compliant daughter, but that her own toxic ambition had led to her undoing. She had tried to destroy me, and in doing so, had destroyed herself. The justice was sweet, but the clarity of that moment, the raw, unvarnished truth in her eyes, was what truly resonated after the courtroom doors closed on that final, decisive day. A profound sense of quiet settled over me. It wasn't triumph, not in the way one might expect from a revenge story. It was something deeper, more significant. It was closure. The inheritance, the house, the money, it was never truly about those things for me. From the beginning, it was about honoring Grandpa Henry's wishes, about protecting his legacy from the hands of people who had no respect for him or for anyone beyond themselves. It was about standing firm against blatant injustice and defending my own integrity when my family tried to tear it apart. What I truly gained from this entire ordeal wasn't financial security, though that was an undeniable benefit. It was a profound sense of peace and a fully realized self-worth that had been chipped away at for years by my parents' subtle emotional abuse and overt favoritism toward Tyler. I had always valued my independence. Now I embodied it. The quiet strength Grandpa had seen in me, that he had fostered, allowed me to weather the storm and emerge stronger. His trust, his belief in me, had been vindicated. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my attention to what truly mattered. Grandpa Henry had been a proud war veteran, and his values of service and community had deeply influenced me. I decided to use a portion of the inheritance to start a nonprofit organization in his honor, Henry's Home, providing housing assistance and support services for veterans struggling to find their footing. It felt like the perfect way to carry on his spirit, to ensure his generosity continued to impact lives long after him in a meaningful way, far removed from the greed and entitlement that had poisoned my family. It was a tribute, a dedication, and a way to channel the pain of betrayal into something truly positive. As for my parents, Diane and Charles, they effectively vanished from my life and from the lives of most people who once knew them. The public scandals, Diane's embezzlement disgrace, Charles' gambling debts, and the humiliating revelation of their financial precarity made them social pariahs in their suburban town. They sold their house, barely making a profit, to cover mounting legal fees and their own exposed debts. I heard whispers that they moved states away, somewhere far from the judgmental eyes of their former social circle. They tried once, very briefly, to contact me, a desperate plea for financial assistance, but I politely, firmly, and entirely unemotionally declined. The ties that bound us had been severed, cleanly and completely. There was no anger left, just a hollow absence where family should have been. Tyler, the golden boy, didn't fare much better. The IRS audits, prompted by the information I withheld from public disclosure but made available to the authorities, revealed the true source of his lavish lifestyle. The band never took off. He was forced to sell the luxury car, lost his apartment, and returned to living a much simpler life, far from the spotlight he craved. He eventually moved states away as well, seeking anonymity, somewhere he could try to reinvent himself away from the shadow of his parents' downfall and his unprivileged collapse. I don't know the specifics of his life now, and honestly, I don't care to. He made his choice. Today, I live in Grandpa Henry's house, surrounded by his memories and the sense of peace he always inspired. The home, once a battleground, is now a haven. I'm rebuilding my career, choosing to work for a company that values transparency and integrity, qualities I now cherish more than ever. My landlord and former boss expressed their apologies, deeply regretting their actions once the truth came out. Mark and I never reconciled, but I found new, healthier relationships built on genuine trust and respect, unburdened by family drama. For the first time in years, perhaps even my entire life, I breathe freely. The air is clear, unpolluted by the toxicity of manipulation and entitlement. This wasn't just justice. It was reclamation. I took back my life, my name, my peace. And in doing so, I truly understood that some legacies are meant to stand, even against the ones who tried hardest to tear them down.